Providing accessible transportation is vital for all Canadians to access every community and province. Persons with disabilities face physical, social, economic, and attitudinal barriers that exclude them from participating fully and effectively in society. Across Canada, 6.2 million people, or 22% of the population, identify as having a disability. This projected number will increase with the aging population. The Accessible Canada Act aims to achieve a barrier-free Canada for persons with disabilities. Accessible communication is essential to ensure people with diverse communication needs have equitable access to all information within all services and programs, including customer service areas, the built environment, and the workplace. The focus of this video will share an overview of communication with the understanding of person-first language. Communication when it comes to customer service from a direct point of contact with individuals, whether in person or through email, mobile devices, or engaging for feedback from individuals. We will explore the built environment from entry to accessing information to completing the journey. The use of technology can remove barriers and improve communication. Understanding how technology can address equity by bridging the gap to a more inclusive environment. Understanding how the design layout and areas in the workplace can help facilitate accessible communication. An overview of the workplace and providing alternate means of communication. How we communicate with each other matters. Understanding people with disabilities are diverse, and every individual's communication preferences vary. What is essential to know is that you should never make assumptions on how you think you should communicate with individuals. Make sure to ask the individual you meet. Most importantly, to use respectful language and know that your intentions and willingness to learn are essential. Inclusive communication ensures people with disabilities feel valued. Communication includes speech, gestures, body language, facial expressions, writing, drawing, symbols, letterboards, communication devices, as well as support services through sign language and use of technology for captioning. Get the person's attention. Speak directly to the person. Repeat the questions. Use clear and plain language. Do not shout. Maintain good eye contact. Use communication supports, mobile devices, pen and paper, letterboards.
Remember that whatever form of communication that you're most familiar with may not be the one that works best for your clients or visitors.
My first language is a sign language. One common misconception is that sign language is a universal language, which is not the case. If there is a spoken or written language, there are over 300 worldwide, and that is the same for sign language as well too. There are over 300 different signed languages.
I think it's really important when someone who's communicating with someone with an intellectual disability that you explained it, even if you have to explain it in 2 or 3 different ways. And give examples to that. So be creative, and if there's a lineup, don't let that lineup deteriorate, because then our anxiety goes up thinking that we have to try to rush. Like, I'm not understanding what you're saying. Can you please explain it in more clarity and plain language for me, so that way I can understand a little more better.
As a blind person, I don't really communicate any differently than anyone else does, except from the visual standpoint. So I communicate by speaking. It's helpful if someone, when they're speaking to me, knows my name and says my name, and then I know that I'm communicating with the person who's speaking. The hardest thing for me to do is knowing if they're speaking to me or somebody else. So often I might ask, are you speaking to me? Just to get clarification as to who we're being spoken to.
Trying to understand what they say when they talk to me, or even when it comes to having an FM system that a person would clip onto their shirt so that I can fully hear what they're saying, because it connects Bluetooth to my hearing aids. Even though I have high frequency hearing loss, which is not too bad, it just enhances the overall hearing experience. Some people also try to speak loudly, assuming that I can't hear them at all, when really I can hear exactly what you're saying. I just might need some reassurance of what you're saying.
Plain language is very important to me. Also, putting the information in a language so that the person with intellectual or disabilities can understand what the information is that's being provided to them, whether it's verbal or written down. And when you're using abbreviation letters, that's letters that people do not understand, such as myself, it's important to put those, instead of letters, it's important to put them in full words, especially if you're not familiar with them.
Customer service is vital at all contact points with individuals who enter your environment. Providing good customer service is essential both in person and when communicating through websites, phones, chat functionalities, and when requiring feedback in evaluation forms from individuals.
When I think about customer service, one of the biggest barriers is knowing where to receive assistance. If I go into a store, the first thing I do is look for either a customer service counter or a cashier. It's important that people just think of me as anyone else. Even though I am not able to see you visually as a blind person, I still require information, and I will let you know what types of information or assistance I require.
If you see somebody who's having a difficult time, whether that's a person on the spectrum or anybody, really take the time to don't just assume you know what's wrong, or assume that this person's trying to make a scene or they're trying to cause trouble. You really have to look at each person on an individualized basis and really look at why they're struggling.
It is important to start telling them how to use groups and accessible times in order to help me and other hard-to-reach customers.
I think some people might not register what it means to communicate in a genuine, kind, accommodating way. It's more than just the tool. It's about how you treat someone as a person, and also realizing that not every disability is the same.
People can be taught how to interact in a way that supports people with a communication disability. An organization can hire speech-language pathologists to teach their employees on how to communicate with people with a communication disability. It's not expensive, it's out there, it's education.
The built environment needs to address all facets of a barrier-free design and include communication as part of these designs to make the building accessible. People with disabilities should be able to navigate from every point of contact, removing barriers from the first point of entry in the building and navigating through the various areas within the building.
I think when we design buildings, train stations, plane stations, we need to take these things into consideration as well in how we build them. So the lighting, the sound, there are many different architects today that will take consideration into the building materials that they use. But it's really important that we move quickly, just as we have with Zoom and meetings and the change of the way we communicate in business, to change the way we communicate with those that are different abled.
Technology can have a significant impact to help with communication on how information is delivered and received. Create experiences where all people can enjoy barrier-free communication from the moment someone enters the building to when they arrive at any location within the facility. Communication in the built environment includes wayfinding signage, lighting, acoustic treatments, to how announcements and emergency evacuation instructions are received and understood. It is important to consult with your employees to identify technology supports to provide accessible accommodations when it comes to communication.
Another suggestion, I know people right now are using a lot of technology. Of course, technology is the way of the world, and I think what would be a great benefit for everyone, whether you're deaf or deafblind, I think hearing people also would benefit from having an app that really had everything all included in one app, where you would have things such as announcements, Oftentimes you'll find a deaf person enters the airport and there might be changes to the gate or the time. Often these things happen in an airport, especially as a deaf-blind person. If we had access to that information that came to our phone, that would be of great benefit. Some sort of station that had visual information that shows any updates or information that's expected that might be also available in Braille for people who aren't able to read or hear in that way.
Combining the audio and the visual and making the signs clearer, making even the audio clearer is really important. I think we should also be looking at how can we generate the messages in print as opposed to just relying on last-minute audio messages when there's emergency situations or just everyday changes in an itinerary.
And there are easy solutions like technology, like the live captioning app or the microphone that I mentioned. Those are things that can be bought and used. It doesn't involve any extra effort on the speaker's part just to talk in the microphone. I think some people might think, oh, it's going to be tough, a challenge to communicate and help a deaf or hard of hearing person follow, but it's not.
Communication in the workplace matters to all employees, and providing training to your employees is essential to ensure communication barriers are eliminated. Before starting the hiring process, make sure your team understands the importance of accessible communication. There is a large pool of talented, educated, skilled people with disabilities ready and able to work. Communication is vital, from posting a job to the interviewing process, training, onboarding, and providing alternative communication methods to including people with disabilities.
At one time in a store, they would only hire the deaf person to be in the stockroom, not dealing with customers. And that's changed now. There are so many deaf, hard of hearing people who are out on the front lines dealing with customers because we've understood that we need to break down barriers and we need to take our thinking out of old ways of perception and to really open up what the possibilities are. And the gains are great, both for the person who has a disability and for the employer.
When it comes to workplace health and safety, if an employer is considering hiring a deaf staff, they should not be concerned about the health and safety risk. It's important to focus on the capabilities and the abilities of the worker that they are intending to hire. And it's also important to remember that when you're offering accessibility, it's not only accessibility to the deaf or disabled individual they're hiring, it's accessibility for all, and it can make the workplace safe and inclusive for everyone.
Accessible plans should include inclusive communication and be part of every area of the planning stages. From the start to the end, and how we communicate with each other needs to be inclusive. It is vital to understand diverse communication and to implement changes that include the addition of technology and apply it to all areas of your business, including customer service, the workplace, and the built environment. Communication is essential in all the places we share. Communication matters.
If there were no clear-cut communication, I would feel as if I had been transplanted to a country where I didn't know a word of the language. And people have to think that that is how it is for Canadians that have barriers to communication, that it literally is a different language. So we need to reach Canadians that have disabilities using different modalities. So whether that be audio communication, visual communication, or other means, we need to figure out what it is that people need and provide that clear-cut communication and that it's consistent across all areas. So whether they're at a Via Rail station or at an airport or at a bank or supermarket, it needs to be clear and effective.
A lot of the systemic design doesn't have accessibility in mind from the ground up, but in terms of communication accessibility, what's really important is to be able to connect with the community and find out what are the needs, what are the gaps, and try to fulfill those gaps to really make the whole systemic approach more accessible.
I find the inability to clearly communicate verbally far more disabling. For some baffling reason, the majority of our society links the ability to speak with the ability to hear and to understand. When many people encounter me, or anyone who has trouble speaking, they assume I do not understand or cannot hear, and begin talking slower and louder, as if speaking loudly increases comprehension. What's up with that?
To me, communication is a basic human right that everyone should have access to. Everyone needs to communicate in order to survive through life.
I think we've come a long way, but I think there's always room for improvement. I don't think where we're at right now that we need to be. I think we're a good 10 years from there right now, so let's keep moving forward and get where we need to be.
I just think that it is very possible to make it accessible. All it takes is just a lot of great minds to think creatively and the will to make it happen.